straw running the meeting person today. And so want to welcome you all here, and I'd like us to start off with a prayer, and then we'll get going. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stand up just because I feel weird sitting down. Dear Lord, I just want to thank you so much for letting all of us be here today. And Father, thank you for giving each and every one of us in this room a servant's heart so that we can truly work toward finding solutions that will be beneficial to all of the children and families here in Harrison County, and then hopefully, Father, to develop a model that can be used throughout the state and elsewhere. Father, thank you for the safe travels for us getting here today, and Father, thank you for just us living in the United States to where we're free to openly discuss and come to solutions and work out issues together, Father. Please bless this meeting and bless those involved. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Okay, so we are circulating the committee member sign-in sheet up here. If you all didn't sign in out there, if you will, there's nothing out there? Okay. It's up here. So if you will, just before you leave, jot your name down so that we can just kind of keep up with who's been here.
You want him to sign on this?
Oh, no, there's another one.
Yeah, there's another one. That's just for us.
Make it easier there. Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of going by the agenda here. The committee members are listed. All the committee members listed are actually present today. We're kind of loosely going off Robert's Rules of Orders because we haven't established our bylaws yet. That is something that we plan to do as a committee over the course of the next couple of weeks, and then at our next meeting, we'll have those bylaws so that we can then adopt them and start operating off of them. So I wanted to just kind of throw that out there. But we do have minutes from our last meeting, and so I'll accept. Pardon? Yeah, for the last.
I guess the last meeting wasn't. We didn't have a quorum.
Yeah, we didn't have a quorum for the last meeting, so it wasn't really a meeting. It was just gathering and discussion. So the last official meeting that we had was July the 19th. So I'll accept a motion from somebody on the committee to waive the reading of the minutes since they were distributed already, and then entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Motion to waive and accept.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that carries. The next order of business is we've just been rotating who leads the meetings, and so what we plan to do today is nominate officers, and these officers that are nominated, and I think maybe we should go ahead and vote on them today, they will be considered acting status until we can adopt the bylaws. And when we adopt the bylaws, then we'll make a motion to formally, I guess, accept those officers, because it's a little hard to conduct business if there's no clear responsibility for each individual member. So the officers that we need are the chair, co-chair, secretary, and there's no money, so there's no need for a treasurer, and then sergeant at arms in case the crew gets rowdy. All right, so nominations for chair.
I nominate Carla Pope.
I second it.
Anybody opposed? If you are, we're gonna rumble.
Go
No,
for
just
it.
kidding.
Go
Okay, all in favor of Carla Pope serving as chair?
Aye.
Okay, so I'll be the chair. All right, co-chair. I'll nominate Kim. Hey,
A second, that revision.
And we had a second?
I'll
Okay,
second.
good. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll have one person do secretary and sergeant at arms, that makes sense. That's good. Okay, so Kim, you're gonna be the co-chair. Okay, and then, Jeannie just suggested, and y'all tell me if you agree, that the duties for secretary and sergeant at arms are not gonna be so overwhelming that one person couldn't do both the duties. So are you okay with combining those responsibilities?
Yes.
Okay, so then, any nominations for secretary / sergeant at arms?
Jenny Herron.
I second that.
We're pointing at you here.
Okay,
Yes.
we have a second
We have a
on
second.
Jeannie being secretary and sergeant at arms? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Jeannie, you're it.
Okay, thank you. No, I'm ready.
Now we just have we all have clear responsibilities, and so we know, what we're all supposed to be doing. We did have two, initial members of the committee. Do you want me to stack them? Don't hurt your back.
You need help?
Okay. Y'all are witnesses. We had two members of the committee that had to resign because of other responsibilities and duties that were pulling them away from being able to attend the meetings fully and participate fully. And so Haley Zelinska and Troy Peterson are no longer on the committee, but of course they both said that if we, needed to ask them anything, that we certainly could use them as a resource. So we appreciate their service. Last Friday,
Do we need nomination to accept?
were they officially anything on the committee?
No.
Do we need, what do y'all think, point of order? I don't know.
Unless it makes you feel
Just
good, we
to
don't.
accept the
Just to
resignation.
accept.
Okay.
Just accept it.
So I'll make a motion to accept their resignation
And I
from
will
the
second
committee.
it.
Okay, any opposed? I mean.
No,
we're not
make
gonna
them
allow
stay
you
and
to
work.
stop. Okay, so that's official now. And so number 7 on the agenda is for me to report on law enforcement luncheon. So what we did last Friday is we hosted, and there were 3 of us. No, 4 of us, that's right, 4 of us were able to make it, but we hosted a luncheon just for law enforcement agencies in Harrison County, for the leaders of those agencies. And then the invitation said, and, whoever within your agency you think will be helpful in, guiding us for child abuse, neglect, and exploitation investigations. And it went really well. It was a great working session. It was informal. And so I have notes that I took that I can just kind of read to you what was covered. So, and again, this is all suggested, so it's not written in stone yet, but go ahead.
Stop you right there. These are anonymous when you read them, please.
Yes, these are all, I don't have any notes about who said what. So the agencies all agreed that they would like to be notified when there is a report of child abuse, neglect, or exploitation made. It's not an automatic thing. So for example, if the hospital has something, it's automatic, they report to CPS, that's required. Law enforcement would just like to be reported to as well, and then if there's a criminal matter that should be investigated they would do that parallel investigation. Don't know how to work out all the details yet, but that was just one thing that was suggested.
Or if they had been there at the, if they've had, didn't they say that if they've been there several times to do?
Yeah, I've got
Oh,
that
I'm
further
sorry.
down in my
I'm sorry.
notes, yeah. Law enforcement also felt that Chancery Court should be in the loop, because a lot of times law enforcement receives calls for disturbances and for, like child swapping, the custody, that kind of thing. And so they just felt like that Chancery Court should be in the loop. They also felt that the district attorney's office should be brought into the discussion, since they're ultimately the ones who would end up prosecuting criminal cases if they're felony cases. And because the committee, the Blue Ribbon Committee, has not met with anybody from the district attorney's office, so we're trying to get big picture on this. The law enforcement agencies would like to attend a roundtable discussion with the district attorney's office regarding the investigations, and get clarification on certain steps in the criminal aspect of child abuse, or, child abuse response. If they get a call for child abuse, they know that they're supposed to notify CPS, but then beyond that, clarify what law enforcement can and can't do. When CPS goes to conduct an investigation or do a follow-up at a home, law enforcement felt it would be helpful if the caseworker would notify the agency and the jurisdiction they're going to. So let's say that I'm a CPS worker and I'm going to go into a home in Social. And it's a case I have, it's a child abuse case, there's a safety plan, and I'm going to do a follow-up. Law enforcement thought that it would be helpful if I called the sheriff's department and said, hey, I'm headed to 123 Shady Lane in Saussure. Have you had any calls for service at that house over the last 2 weeks, since I was there last? Just to kind of help provide that caseworker with any pertinent information or incidences that may have taken place. And also, they thought that that could be a safety thing for the caseworkers going out. That way they're not showing up at a house where, 2 nights before there was a big brawl and, emotions are still inflamed.
And that way, police could potentially go with the social
Yes.
worker, so the
Yes.
social worker is safe.
Yes. Now, that what they did not articulate is they don't want to be put in a position to escort CPS workers every time they go on a case.
Mhm.
There's just not enough manpower for that.
Right.
But they thought that,
In certain
It-
instances where it's a little more,
right, that, and then also it would just be helpful for CPS if they knew what they were going into. It was suggested, and again, this was suggested, it was suggested that statutes be rewritten to separate the duties of youth court judges so that one judge would hear like the non-delinquent aspects of cases and a separate judge would hear the delinquent aspect of cases. Don't know how that would work. That was just suggested, okay? They would like some clarification on criteria for detaining juveniles who are caught committing burglaries. I know there's like a rubric that's used to determine, and I think they just wanted some more clarification and maybe rationale.
And that wasn't
Behind.
limited to just burglaries, that was to include felonies.
Yeah, all felonies,
Right.
all felonies, not just violent ones. They also would like us to or not us, but it should be explored to establish a grant for each law enforcement agency to have an investigator dedicated solely to the investigation of abuse, neglect, and exploitation in cases. And the discussion around that kind of centered around like a multidisciplinary approach to those cases. And they didn't know if there's any grant funds out there, but maybe that should be explored. And then also to provide training to law enforcement agencies with regard to the initial investigation of an abuse, neglect, or exploitation cases. I know that, you know, in general, when police officers go through the law enforcement academy, they receive training on crime scene response and things like that. But maybe there needs to be ongoing training and updated training on, you know, if you get a call for a child abuse case, maybe the child had scalding water poured on them. Well, the initial officer responding may not know, okay, it's important to take pictures. It's important to check the temperature settings on the hot water heater or whatever. And so maybe to shore up ongoing training. So that, we thought it was a very productive meeting. It just kind of kept being said repeatedly that the framework that is there is a good framework, that we need to maybe help to identify where there's some gaps, both on, you know, on all the entity sides, to shore up the investigations a little bit more and the responses.
May I say something?
Sure.
It was absolutely wonderful to have these law enforcement officers there who were willing to share ideas, their thoughts, their suggestions as to what improvements could be made in various ways, not just restricting it to this committee, but to the area as a whole. I learned so much, and it was really a good luncheon.
It was.
Yeah.
I agree.
The next item on the agenda is workflow of how a case starts and ends through CPS's perspective. And Robert, do you want to kind of announce what you told us a couple of minutes ago, that you're just kind of, you're in the chain of command to see?
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out who best would be able to explain that. And so,
Right.
training on-
Right, so we sent an email to Robert a week or so ago, just because we know generally the steps that are taken for an investigation, but we are really interested in the minutia on those kind of procedures that are followed. And I will say that I think that when we do that and tell your powers that be, my suggestion is when we meet with you guys to get that information, I would like us to be in executive session to do that, so that there is no risk of, breaching any kind of confidentiality or whatever. I mean, I know, like if we were calling narcotics officers in here to talk about investigation of drug dealers, they could speak in general terms, but they're not gonna give the nitty-gritty detail in public, and they shouldn't. And so I'm assuming it would be the same. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that we would want to be in executive session for that meeting.
Okay, that's.
Okay?
Do you mind if I ask if you guys have any comments from your standpoint from what the police officer has sort of suggested? If there's things you think might work, might not work, or from what Carla was saying? It might be too early to tell, but just
Yeah,
if you had any comments, I
It was
guess.
a whole lot.
Yeah.
There are a few I have questions about, but no comments right now. I want to
Okay.
kind of
Fair enough.
digest it, but I appreciate it.
And these were just suggestions that they had, and they just were freely talking. The same as what we're hoping when y'all make your presentation to the executive committee, that you are freely talking with us and feeling comfortable to share information. So thank you.
I have a question. Was somebody a representative from CPS or a representative from youth court at the law enforcement?
No, it was only for
that-
law,
it was
it was
not.
only for law enforcement, so that we could kind of
Right.
introduce them
Right.
And feel
to the
So-
Blue Ribbon Committee and what the
Right. So y'all
purpose
were,
is.
they were there? Y'all were
No,
at-
No,
no, they were not, only law enforcement was invited, yeah.
Gotcha. So that might be a thing to do because I
Yeah,
think it's, there, and I'm speaking from historical knowledge here, so. There were, many years ago, there was a multidisciplinary team.
yes,
That existed. And who was part of that team was CPS, a member of youth court, law enforcement, a medical doctor. It was representative of each of the disciplines within the community. And maybe what we're needing here in terms of an end goal is to have that done again. I don't know what happened to it. It went by the wayside, I suppose, or who knows? Katrina washed it away. I don't know.
Is it?
It's ongoing.
Cool,
Is the,
see, that's something that, you
so
know,
where is it, where you said it's ongoing, so where, maybe someone from here could be invited to that as well? I didn't realize it was still ongoing. Where is it held and who's it held by?
The CAC facilitates the MDT meetings.
Okay, so maybe someone from the committee here could get an invite to that or be included in that possibly, that, since it is still happening. Because that's really important. That's where a lot of high-risk cases would be discussed.
How frequent is it?
I believe it's once a month.
And is it still held right over here or where?
I'm not sure where the location is being held right now. We have a representative from CPS that just attends those meetings.
Okay, so possibly they could attend this meeting too then, maybe.
So we just need to.
Well, I think that's part of the problem. There's a lot of silos as far as.
well, and that's what I think our role here is, so maybe we can get with CPS to, I don't know y'all's procedures, I know generally, and then look at, you know.
Right.
How about somebody go ahead and make contact with this group that we're just standing here talking with, like maybe Jenny could send an email, or you could, or I could, somebody, and at least start making that initial contact. Because a few minutes ago, we weren't even sure they existed still.
Right. Did
Who
you-
would I contact,
The
Cindy?
Child Advocacy Center. the
Right, I know,
CAC.
but who at the Child Advocacy Center?
Daniel Dooley,
Who?
Daniel Dooley is one.
Daniel, do,
Dooley.
And that, just for point of reference, so the current MDT is active, meets monthly, and there are representatives on MDT from CPS, from CASA, from the district attorney's office. Our assistant district attorney, Chris Daniel, is a member of that
Okay.
committee. He is an active participant, and then representatives from every law enforcement agency in the county are invited, and we have representation there. We actively staff cases. And the whole point, which I think a lot of y'all know, is for the expedited fashion of prosecution of those cases.
Right,
But in many instances, it's connecting the dots of information where law enforcement does have those gaps, where they may have a warrant and can't find these people.
right.
There are oftentimes instances where CPS or my CASA volunteers, I have a representative from my staff that goes monthly where we have more contact, and we're lay people. My volunteers are lay people. So we can bring those facts and help get these people arrested, and then help with hopefully getting swift prosecution of them.
Do you know if law enforcement routinely attends the meeting? I know you said they're invited.
Mhm.
It's so funny because
That's what
the
I'm
other
saying.
day,
What's in these-
nobody
what's in
said
these bullet
anything
points doesn't
about it.
indicate
So
No.
we just assumed it didn't exist,
That's why I was asking, because, yeah, there was no indication
like
whatsoever.
none.
But for my notes, if you don't mind, what is your name?
Cynthia Chauvin, CHAUVIN.
And Cynthia, who are you with?
CASA of South Mississippi.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's helpful.
But I will also say that some of what was mentioned was just the idea of training and people not being included in those silos. That is an absolute element of the MDT process, is to continually train on mandatory reporting, on going into the schools, on going into, routinely doing those trainings so that people, stakeholders, because we're constantly putting in new officers, new professionals in all of these different silos to keep them fresh with that information. So I think the MDT may be an existing entity whose focus is covering a lot of what you're talking about, wanting and needing.
That's wonderful, thank you.
And MDTs are in multiple counties. They're in statute and they all have their own process. There's a protocol, there's a confidentiality associated because we do staff cases. So I think the question about could somebody from the committee join that, I think that's a question to ask the CAC. They'll have an MDT coordinator on the Harrison CAC's.
Now, you mentioned there was a statute. Do you happen to know offhand what the statute number is?
No clue.
Okay, I'll look.
Yes.
Thanks.
Did that answer your question? Because I think you started off.
I mean, I'd asked if they wanted to comment, but they weren't
Yeah.
ready.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
contact Daniel.
I just wanted them to have a voice.
I'll
Yeah.
contact them.
Any
He's got
other
one more.
discussion? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm Tom Matthews, I'm the county prosecutor for Stone County.
Okay.
Hello,
I
welcome.
spoke to Ms. Powers on the phone a few weeks ago about coming to the meeting, but I'm in no way here in any official representation of Stone County. I am here entirely of my own accord. I've been prosecuting in Stone County for approximately 10 years, and my dad did it all the way back to the 70s when youth court began, so been around it my entire life. We have a small court up there with a family master, youth court referee, whatever you want to call it, 2 or 3 guardian ad litems, myself as the prosecutor, and several, a really good child protective services up there. 2 things I've heard so far. One was law enforcement's suggestion that there be separate hearings between the neglect side and the delinquent side. That does not work, because so many delinquent cases, if a kid tears a house apart, there's a reason. And the reason is, more than likely, there's drugs in the home. Most of the time, when a kid tears apart the family home, it's because he has no outward expression to the world, nobody that he thinks he or she can call, and he or she is doing so to get attention. A large percentage of the time. So the division of those things does not work.
Right.
Just scratch that completely, I'm sorry.
And I think, if you don't mind my interrupting, I think that their context of that
Right.
was, there's been times when they've caught juveniles burglarizing,
Pawn shop.
stealing guns, breaking into a pawn shop or whatever,
Right.
stealing guns. And and strictly from law enforcement's perspective, these are dangerous kids who are breaking into places and getting weapons, and they are told, no, you cannot detain them. They have to just sign whatever paper with mom and dad and send them home. And so from and they deal with the same kids over and over again. So that was their frustration, speaking out and going, can't we get someone that'll,
And a lot of times those kids, same type situation.
Right.
Mom and dad are not home, they're high as a kite
Right.
somewhere.
Mhm.
It's the same situation. When you start trying to separate those things, it doesn't really work. Also, you really want to be careful about just how much law enforcement you bring into youth court, because these are children and they are not yet adults. And even though they sometimes commit heinous acts, the #1 goal of youth court is to rehabilitate our children so that they do not wind up in our county jails. That's #1 right there. And also to rehabilitate the families. When you start to send out too much law enforcement into a youth court, parents don't open up about their drug addictions. Drug addiction is nothing more than trying to fill some empty hole. And the whole idea of youth court is rehabilitation of adults. They ought to call it drug addicted parent court is what they really
Right.
should call it. Because if I've got 74 kids in custody in Stone County right now, 73 of them are there because of methamphetamine or cocaine or something like that the parents are on, that they just, fentanyl now, it's a crazy thing. And then also, as to the procedure for investigations, it's all right there in, you can pull it up and look through CPS manuals, it's all there. You don't have to worry about going into an executive session, it's all just there.
It's all there on the
It's all there on
website?
paper, yeah, on the
Okay.
website. Yeah, you don't have to fiddle, look and do that, but.
So I think, too, I want to make sure that y'all know, law enforcement didn't express that they wanted to go on every call. They just thought it would be helpful, and Kim helped me, or Jeannie helped me remember, Debbie. They were talking about a particular call where maybe there was a murder or something, and then CPS showed up because they were doing a follow-up and had no idea anything had gone on, and so they came in and there was this whole big can of worms, and so
that day.
Yeah, it was later that day.
Yeah.
It didn't
CPS
happen
came
on
in.
the same day.
yeah, and so they thought if it was just kind of a matter of procedure or whatever for CPS, when you're going to a resident, I know it's just one more thing to do, but just call on the way.
Well,
Call the agency and say, hey, this is the address I'm going to. Have y'all had calls for service? Is there anything that's
Going on.
been going on?
and in this particular case, by the time the CPS worker got there, police were gone, and when they came in, everything was fine, and that was the report. Everything was
yeah.
good.
Yeah,
But there was just a shootout at that resident hours before.
That
Yeah.
helps.
And that's, that could have been bad. CPS worker could have walked into a really bad situation and got,
mhm.
been harmed herself or himself.
Yeah, they were really quick to say, we don't want.
To go on every call.
Exactly, they were really quick to say that.
Right.
But that particular, situation, they thought could have been really bad. And if CPS could have called before they went, then
We've got
law
more
enforcement could have
information.
said, oh, let me tell you, we just had a shootout there 2 hours earlier, so you need to be careful, and here's what happened, kind of thing. So. Any other discussion about that? What? Okay. The next thing on the agenda is, at some point, we want to invite some of our state representatives, because we hope that, once we've identified the needs, if there needs to be a statutory solution, that we can have our state representatives on board with it, and involved with it. And so that is our plan at some point. We talked a couple of weeks ago about an alert for when CPS can't find a family.
I think that was
because-
baby DJ law.
Right,
Yeah, and-
because they'll actively hide
Right.
from CPS. And I saw where they just created the purple alert
Mhm.
for, is
I
it
see.
for special needs? I don't know, anyway,
May I make a suggestion on the topic of legislators coming in your meeting?
yes,
Specifically, there has been proposed legislation last session to create 20 new Chancery Court judges that would be specific to youth court. Right now, you have approximately, one in every county just about, either a designated county court judge, or you have a youth court referee. In the 62 smaller counties, you have youth court referees. The idea that most of these legislators don't have clue, one, what goes on inside of youth court. They don't understand that we get a phone call, myself, the prosecutor, the guardian ad litem, CPS, whoever, 30 minutes later, we got to be in an emergency hearing. Or the next day at 8 a.m., we got to be in an emergency hearing. There is no possible way that 20 specially appointed Chancery Court judges will ever even get close to being able to do the job. And then when one particular legislature was confronted with that fact, he said, well, why don't we just appoint youth court referees to help out? Well, that's what we've got already, and it's working fine. So the idea of creating 20 new Chancery Court positions will not work. I spend at least 12 hours a week in Chancery Court, in youth court in Stone County, just little bitty county that we are. And it's gotta be at the drop of a hat. You have deadlines to meet, you gotta have shelter hearings and detention hearings within 48 hours. There is no way that one chancellor that's assigned a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 county district, like in the Delta, low population regions, there's no way that that's gonna work. Part two to that is that if you do that, most of the people that come into my youth court don't have transportation. They barely, sometimes don't have shoes. And that's statewide. It doesn't matter what county you're in. And if you start trying to put a Chancery Court judge in Harrison County that serves Stone, Harrison, and Hancock, my people are not going to have a ride to get down to the hearings. There's no way. People in Forest, Lamar, Perry, Marion, Pearl River County, if you put one judge in that area, they're not going to be able to get to the hearings. And it just goes on and on, reasons not to do that.
Right.
Because it would take a judge in just about every 2 counties to make that happen, and then you've blown a lot of money, creating new Chancery Court positions that are already being served by some very well-meaning volunteers. In particular, the youth court referees, they love their job. The small town county prosecutors like myself, it's our favorite job, working in youth court. You can ask any one of us. And I'm here on a Friday afternoon, not working to just try to come bring some information from a small town perspective. But in particular, Bryce Wiggins over in Pascagoula is one of them that's proposing that, and I don't know that he spends a lot of time in youth court and understands that. I would invite him so that he can understand that that's not going to work.
Well, just to make sure you kind of understand, I hear what you're saying. What brought us together was the fact that we had 3 babies come up dead.
Sure.
In a 6-week period. And, you know, any baby coming up dead is unacceptable. But when you have 3 back to back to back, then that just screams that something is not working the way it's supposed to. None of us are experts in all the aspects. And so that's kind of why we're doing these meetings.
And the number one place that's coming from is from the very top. And because the state does not want to put the money behind the Olivia Y case and hire frontline workers, because they're not doing that. 3 years ago, I had 142 kids in custody in Stone County on average. Today, it's averaging in the 70s. I know that those other 70 some odd kids are in houses they don't need to be in. And the answer of the state has been to leave these children in drug-infested homes rather than put a little more money on frontline workers to get them out of these homes. You will not rehabilitate a parent if you don't take children out of that home. You can put all the inpatient services you want in a house. You are blowing in the wind. Not 1% of those parents will make any effort whatsoever to use psychiatric counseling that's put in the home if you don't take the kids out. And then even when you do, you still, you rehabilitate parents maybe, and this is just a wild guess, maybe 40%, 45% of the time, and another 35% of the time, the kid winds up going to live with a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, something like that, a close family member. And then in that 5 to 10% range, it winds up with adoptions, particularly with smaller children. But
Well, it's
at our prosecutor seminars, they basically chastise us if our numbers are high.
Who's the they?
The head of CPS, Andrea Sanders.
So that,
And it's, and they're trying to, and this is what she said at one particular prosecutor seminar, change the system to be more like Arkansas. Arkansas basically has no judicial and no prosecutorial oversight until there's an adoption in sway, from what I understood from that conference. That's disturbing, because if you, and I love the CPS workers, but in some places, it's just like any other job. Some people do a good job, some people do a bad job, but if you've got checks and balances there to watch over what's being done versus there is no check and balance, perhaps in Arkansas, we don't want that system. I get paid the same if I work in youth court or not, but that terrifies me. Even spending a dozen hours a week in youth court in Stone County, that scares me to death, that even with the workers that I have that I like, because they do come and go from time to time, it would scare me to death to know that somebody's child could go into CPS custody, and this bright idea to get around Olivia White is to so fundamentally change CPS, and that's what they're doing. They're pushing CPS to fundamentally change from the top down in Jackson. It's got to be stopped.
and so that's kind of,
That was to go around Olivia
what we
Wise
were
with the
thinking
stop.
is why statutory solutions could be helpful. But I'm speaking from a complete perspective of ignorance on that.
Undoing what has been done in the last 3 years is more important. That's the real thing right there. I don't know how else to say it. It's an absolute mess. And I can, you look at the numbers, they throw these numbers up on the screen, and they have like almost a reward system at the prosecutor seminars. There's, oh, your county's in the green because you have very few children in custody. Yours is in the yellow, yours is in the red because you've got a lot of kids in custody. You know what? You need a lot of kids in custody. I hate to say it, but that's the only way to rehabilitate families. The whole idea of this thing is to rehabilitate mom and dad. More emphasis has to be given on getting mom and dad the help that they need to get off drugs, to get their feet under them, to get a job, transportation, housing. One of the suggestions that I have is for CASA, which is, they do a good job, they focus on the child. The national charter says they're not allowed, from what I understand, they're not allowed to work closely with the parents. When those parents, when their children are taken, and they enter into what we call a service agreement, it's an agreement, you agree to go to a 90-day inpatient rehab, you agree to once you get out, keep following up with your NA, AA meetings, whatever, get a house, get a job, get, transportation, basically become a functioning adult. It is the minimum requirement for being a functioning adult. I'm all for CASA taking kids to McDonald's playgrounds and for trips and all that stuff, but if there's any way the national headquarters could allow CASA volunteers to help out with taking parents to job interviews, dropping them off at rehab.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you
All
right
that
there
kind
for
of
just a second,
Sure.
We've got other people here that are wanting to ask questions.
Sure.
CASA is out of our,
Right.
that's, we have a CASA director right here, and I know being an ex-CASA director, we're not allowed, they were never allowed to take kids to, in the transportation in the car and McDonald's and all that, so
Right.
some of the
It's a
information you have
liability
is
issue.
wrong. But that needs to be brought up with national CASA, and by all means, go for it. Go for it. But I think Susie over here come to our
Sure.
next meeting and you can, state, but I think Susie, we have about 15 more minutes, and Susie, you had a question, and thank you, Susie, for calling.
I am Susie Harville. We work against human trafficking. I'm the CEO and founder of Advocates for Freedom. But going along with what he said, he is on the money as
Right, he
far
is.
as we in our homes that take in, survivors, will not allow them to have their children in the home. We'll take them to go see their children, we'll turn upside down, they'll have them do visitation. But a person, unless they're rehabilitated as a parent,
Right,
you will fail.
exactly.
What happens in so many of these homes is they focus on bringing the kids in to keep mom and the numbers up and all of that. Well, number one, mom, by the time we get them, is a very broken human being.
Mhm.
And until she can get herself healed, and
Right,
we have a 2-year program, it is impossible for mom to mom.
right,
It's impossible for mom to be mom and dad. And we do have a situation that if we can look at it like you all are doing, and I applaud you greatly, that if we can do something, not to hit numbers, because that's what I hear all of the time, and that's what I bump into all of the time and have for 14 years. I'm not the new kid on the block, and I can honestly say that is where it needs
It's
to
gone
have
wrong,
some true
right.
focus.
So
And
I agree, the
I
numbers.
mean, you're looking at it from your viewpoint, and we
Right.
look at it from
Yeah,
ours.
everybody's
It
focusing-
really is a
Right.
tough job.
It is.
Yeah, everybody's focusing on the numbers, and, you know, when you have a 75% reduction of kids, especially in Harrison County over the last 3 or 4 years,
Oh,
you know,
With an
that's,
increase of
you know,
reporting.
pardon?
Increase
Coupled
of
with an
reporting.
increase in
Yeah,
reporting.
so you're saying, and a lot of people that don't know, you know, what's going on, they think that's great. Well, that is not great.
No.
You know, we all know that's a failure, right there, because neglect and abuse haven't stopped. So something is amiss there. So I get what you're saying, you know, I do, and that's why we're here, to make sure, you know, that, Judge Alfonso, matter of fact, is working on baby DJ law. And she'll be presenting that, at our next, meeting, which is September, what, 6th, or?
No,
Yeah.
if it's 2 weeks,
Huh?
it should be
No, it's on the first.
August the 30th.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 1st and 3rd, that's
Yeah, we
right, I
have the
forgot.
first and third we have, this
Yes,
first and third Fridays of every month.
September 6th.
Yeah.
Just in
Yes.
brief response, that
Huh?
I've always been told that the reason that those, you know, the nonprofit entities that do work with people don't work with the parents is because it's a liability issue. And then you think, wait a second, liability issue with parents, you know, I get that, but like it's even, you have more liability to deal with children. So I don't know the national argument, I don't think their defense of that.
Well, I think you
holds
need
water.
to contact National CASA. Go ahead,
I
Cindy.
have.
Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Cindy, I mean,
I
Susie.
just wanted to say
She's not
that
done
our
yet.
numbers on the moms who had the children,
Right.
and that's not all of our people, not everybody had a child that they have responsibility for. But on them, we've had better than a 95% if we keep the children out of the house,
Right.
let mom focus on her healing for 2 years, and then turn around and let her see the child all the time, have the birthday parties, every weekend visitation. We don't wanna take the mom away from the child.
So it's basically the oxygen mask theory.
That's,
Right.
right, but it does work,
Oh, yeah, I believe that. I
Prove that
totally
it does
believe that.
because we tried it the other way.
Cynthia, go ahead.
I just have a couple things to say. You know, as an organization that is independent of both CPS and the youth court, but serves through judicial appointment of the youth court in Harrison County and 950 other chapters around the country, the reason why National CASA has not expanded our primary mission is because we are still only serving a little bit more of half of all of the children in our country's foster care system. And National CASA has said that until we are able to provide a volunteer for all those kids, we have to stay focused. We're a 48-year organization that has over 93,000 CASA volunteers around the country. Just a couple of things, just because in my spare time during COVID, I went back and got a master's in child welfare law and policy from Loyola Chicago. Back during the years that President Trump was in office, the state's response to changing the child welfare system in the state of Mississippi is a response that is vetted in federal law. So during President Trump's administration, the Families First Prevention Services Act said that, and it was an effort to acknowledge the unreversible trauma that happens when you separate a child from their primary caregiver. I understand completely what the folks in the room are saying, but we would be remiss if we did not consider the fact that taking a child from their primary caregiver is the second most harmful damage that we can do to a child, second to death of a parent or a caregiver. So while we recognize, I certainly recognize as an independent entity, and my volunteers do, that there are times when children's imminent risk of harm is more critical than that trauma that's going to ensue when the department has to separate the child from their primary caregiver.
If we can speak, if I can interrupt you a moment, okay? So oftentimes within those homes, they're already experiencing trauma.
Absolutely.
As a provider, I can tell you that is what, so that's the primary trauma.
Yeah.
Now, what you're talking about is a secondary trauma of course, maybe compounding some of those. Although that theory in and of itself is not necessarily one that says it's all exclusive. In other words, we don't want to re-traumatize a child, so we're going to leave them in a traumatic home setting, right? So both, we can hold both. In other words, I can totally sit and agree with you, yes, removing a child from a home or a primary caregiver is traumatic. However, there's already trauma. So you have to begin to identify that way before there is even the need for removal. So what this gentleman is saying back there, which is we need way more social workers that are working within the system so that ultimately we don't end up where there's a removal that has to occur because we're going to end up with 3 deaths. So I say all of that because sometimes I think the water gets incredibly muddied when we kinds of research that's out there. But I think when we hold one specific, removing the child is traumatic, without going, this child's already experiencing trauma and is already traumatized, so what are we doing to address that? Because that's the root. All the other begins to be compounded, right? For all of us who have worked with traumatized children, we can say that that is exactly. So I think, I guess I'm getting on a soapbox and I apologize for that. But it is something that we act as though these are exclusive of each other. And it's troubling when I hear that.
Well, if I may, the current system does not. I mean, it's all weighted. I mean, you've got what's the risk of imminent harm to this child compared to.
It's
I mean,
the best.
It's
Is the child safe is the primary question to be asked. Is that child safe within that home in this moment? And if the answer to that is no, then that child needs to be removed from that home so that the home can be stabilized. But if we do not do that, if we sit and say, regardless of whether this child is safe or not, we're going to keep them in the home because we don't want to traumatize them, that's a flawed philosophy, is what I'm getting at.
Well, and I think also you have to look at what is the definition of safe. Because I think sometimes that definition of a safe home can be skewed one way to meet this need and skewed the other way to meet another need. And so, and I know that you can't have a cookie cutter approach to everything, but to me, drugs in the house, drug users coming and going in the house increases opportunities for younger children to, or you know, even preteens, to be pimped out for drugs or to be traded for drugs. And
Small children put their hands on the coffee table,
yes,
put their
yeah,
hands in
right.
the mouth.
that's right.
And
Fentanyl.
we have them test positive 3, 5, 8,000 methamphetamine level
Right,
just from contact with the environment that they're in.
right.
I
And
mean,
so to me,
That's what you gotta get them out of.
to me, that is a not safe environment. But if some other definition, whoever's the decision makers, if their definition of safe is, well, they're not being physically beaten, there's no broken bones, there's food around, then we're gonna leave them in this home. And so I think that is, so I think maybe that's one thing we need to look at is this definition of safe and how is it applied?
Well, a child testing positive for the doctors.
Right.
Right.
That's not
Right.
safe. That's
Right.
not safe.
That's
Right. So,
But it's happening.
Yeah.
Okay,
These
so-
children are going home.
so we've
we
got-
take the
exactly.
family
We
to
have
we've
about
got 2 minutes, and we can literally sit here and talk about this.
Can I make one more quick side
Oh, I
comment?
think that,
Oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
you were at our last meeting, the blonde hair, you work at Memorial,
Yeah.
and
Lauren.
thank you, Lauren, and I said, come to the next meeting, you would have a chance. She's mortified, she's like, oh my gosh. Did you want to state something, or did you have a question from our last meeting?
It just goes along with all the same statements, like the defining safe in the home is a real tricky thing, and while, yes, there can be safe homes that are not safe, it has to be looked at. I mean,
Right,
to keep kids in homes because they are deemed to be safe because they have 2 parents and transportation and a house and food does not make that home safe for every child.
right.
And I think the definitions have to be considered in situations because that is where we are failing these kids. We've had multiple circumstances in the hospital and multiple units over the past 2 weeks where that has been the case and the kids have gone home, but it is not safe homes.
So why do you say they're not safe homes, and you've reported that to CPS?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so why aren't they safe?
when you have children going home with parents who are not being fed, who are not being cleaned, who are not being taken for follow-up appointments for documented concerns, and it's deemed that they're safe because there is food in the house and there is a car to get them to those appointments. But why have they not, yes, those things are there, but they're not being done. When
Right,
you have a patient who's positive for drugs and they're going home because they have a house and they have transportation but why? Why are these moms positive? Why are these babies positive for
And not just babies
illicit
either,
drugs?
toddlers
Not
as
just
well, yeah,
right.
that shouldn't
not
be
just
just
from pot,
positive from the
but
placenta.
illicit fentanyl, cocaine, drugs. And they're going home to that situation, like that doesn't feel safe. And when you've visually watched them in the unit, not providing care, not responding, high as a kite, and you've documented safety concern after safety concern, that doesn't feel like a safe situation.
mhm,
And that's where I'm saying I think there is definitely disconnect. There is definitely something is not happening that should be happening.
very good, thank you. Anything
Just,
else?
just one thing, I promise. So,
You have
in the last
2
few
minutes.
years, 2 minutes, I'll keep it under that. In the last few years, they have, from the top down in CPS, I had 5 very good frontline workers, years and years and years and years and years. And now I look over my shoulder in the courtroom and I've got 1 worker sometimes 2. There's 2 supervisors watching that 1 worker in the room. There's 3 supervisors watching those 2 supervisors. There's 4 supervisors watching those 3. It is preposterous, the levels of
Too many chiefs and not enough Indians.
bureaucracy that has erupted in the last 3 years. It is just beyond me. I don't know who these people are. No idea where they came from, who they are, what they're doing. But we don't have enough frontline
Right.
workers, and they have now divided the frontline workers into like investigation, and the follow-up and adoption, and they've categorized people that 3 years ago, 1 worker knew all of those jobs.
Yep.
Piece of cake, there's no reason they can't know all those jobs. They think it's more efficient to delineate out and give them all separate jobs, and that is not, it is not
Right.
working. That has got to go back to the way it was. The frontline worker needs to know all the jobs start to finish from the time they take it.
I think they go through cycles though of reorganizing and doing all that. I'll
It's,
take
it's
it.
gotten too.
Billy, did you
Can I
have one
make
thing,
one quick one?
1 minute?
I'll make it real quick. Ellen and I have been with CASA for 8, 9, 10 years. We were first line. I guess we were doing something wrong because when we were working with the children, we were also working with the parents. We made sure that they had to have the drug test, everything that you explained, we worked with them. We basically left CASA because of the family first ruling. Everybody wants to know why we're no longer CASAs. That was it, because when we went in, nobody listened to us. We tried to go to court and it goes back into the home. Now, you say the trauma is putting the child away from the family. The child is going back to the same family that molested them, drugged them, and everything else. Where is the incentive for that parent to get any better?
Right.
If you take the child out, in of 8 years, 9 years that we had working with the children, in the youth court, in the children's shelter, in the homes, we traveled to Memphis, we went to Mill Creeks, every Mill Creek in Mississippi we've been to. The children, we never saw the trauma of going back to the parents. In fact, it was almost the opposite. The thing about it is if they left a bad situation, why put them back in it if the parents have no incentive now
Get
to
better.
do anything?
Right.
And so that's my minute.
Thank
I just
you.
wanted to throw
Very
that
well
out
said,
for
Billy.
my experience.
Very well said. Okay, our next meeting is September 6th. If you want to be on the agenda, contact me. And you'll have, what did we decide, 3 minutes or?
3 minutes.
3 minutes, to state your thing. And Robert, I'm gonna get with you Tuesday to determine when you're gonna present to, okay? Hey Tiffany, how are you?
And I want to tell every one of you, thank you.
Thank you,
We
Via.
really
Thank
do
you, all of
appreciate you taking time out of your day to come over here and talk with us. And you were heard. Each and every one of you were heard.
Did everybody sign the sheet so we know who you are?
All right, we're officially adjourned.
Yes.
Thank you.